332. Relic 3. Year 307. The Sun Rings. Where's the Demon King? Rune asked, almost as if taunting them. And yet, there wasn't any reaction. The world of the Sun Rings, the twin rings each moved at its own speed like the rings on a gyroscope. In some ways, they were similar to the three-ringed world and naturally invited the question whether these two worlds were related. But it didn't take long for us to realize there were several critical differences. Three-ringed world had three rings as default. The rings were a creation that came together with that realm. The sun rings, on the other hand, were truly artificial. They were a construct meant to draw the mana from the world's sun and convert them into void mana. The mages were busy installing and testing gigantic constructs, filled with crystals and magical formations. These were meant to map out the magical currents flowing deep underneath the sun ring's surface. Hundreds and thousands of such constructs were built over the past year. Tested, and now finally deployed en masse. This was the strength of the Order's magical military-industrial complex in full display, which gathered resources from multiple worlds to feed its constantly growing need. These things would not be possible without our expansion to Delvigard and the other worlds. The sunsteel and sunmetals could be tuned to be sensitive to the flow of void mana underneath the sun rings, while the anti-magic glass from the anti-magical demon world was helpful to tune out unnecessary influences. So, is this finally supposed to work? The domain holders gathered to finally see the first few data points. We set up a mobile base on the nearby demon world and used it to collect all the information transmitted by the magical crystals. Yes, it should. The last bits are going in now. Stella pointed as a batch of crystals were sent back to Treehome. One of the hurdles we faced was the manual data collection process. Our mages had to visit each and every device to retrieve the magical crystals. These magically shielded crystals stored all the data collected by the magical sensors. There were already magical crystals capable of using message to transmit their stored and collected data, and with the help of Alka's crystalline computers, they could perform fairly decent work of collecting data on other worlds. But the sun rings were not ordinary places, because there was so much void mana, and these void mana often eroded the quality of messages, such that magical communication was unreliable and distorted. One alternative, of course, was to use artificial souls on each and every of these data points, but it was a fairly wasteful way of using artificial souls on these things, since artificial souls were destroyed once these data collection artifacts were deconstructed later, mainly to recover their relatively valuable sunsteel and sunmetals. This was expected to be a single, short-term exercise, and so manual collection it was. The data collected would be uploaded and then digested by Patrick. Right, that's the last one. Any amendments to the analysis? Stella asked the artificial mind that served as Patrick's interface. No, Lady Stella. The Supermind Titan quickly tapped into my other abilities to project the initial findings. We didn't quite understand the mechanism of the sun rings, but the compilation of our data points suggested that the flow of magic underneath the sun rings created a powerful magical field that stripped the sun's mana and turned it into void mana. A magical formation at the scale of suns and stars. The exact mechanism was still under study, but Stella's intuition was that it was tampering with some fundamental quality of mana. Like how that princess of Baruch from so many centuries ago accidentally turned some normal mana into void mana, not dissimilar from how many of our own void mages created void mana and drew void mana from our surroundings. Alka looked at Stella and asked the obvious question. Can we weaponize this? This formation may not be of demonic origins. Even if they've claimed it and are using the void mana created for their own purposes to feed their black sun. As a weapon, Stella sat and agreed. Possible. We may have to reconfigure the structure of the sun rings' inner patterns, but once our mages create models of these sun rings at smaller scales, we can try to tamper with them. The formations and patterns should scale. Should. Rune and Johann both said at the same time. That's how magic works, boys. We think of something that might work. Then we try it out. We learn something either way. Stella countered. Lausanne, who popped in and was eager to test out Lightwood. More importantly, when are we going into the dungeons? The magical scanning artifacts also revealed the presence of a subterranean labyrinth located on the far side of the sun rings, a place we only visited on the surface during our first few visits. Someone's eager to test out her new toy. Rune teased. I am not a toy. Lightwood spoke, making Rune blush. I'm not gonna get used to that. The ranger replied, embarrassed. The entrance to the Sun Ring's inner chambers was exceptionally difficult conventionally. There was no opening large enough for anyone to go through. But Lumuf's ability to extend routes meant we could get around these size restrictions and teleport individuals from one end of his routes to the other. It was a fairly slow process, thus not very practical in most combat situations, but it got the domain holders through to the labyrinth. Well, we're here. The place was unlit, but even with light, there were no defenders. It was a lifeless place filled with ancient structures long since abandoned. Things in this chamber were hardly exposed to the outside world, and the domain holders had to pull in their presence. It was so easy for their aura to accidentally touch something and trigger something else. The air tasted metallic and felt as if it was drained of all life. All around us were just ancient buildings and corpses. Corpses were all dried out, but somehow incredibly well preserved. I don't know how old these are. Lausanne used a magical stick and tried to gently poke one of the corpses. They look like dwarves. How'd they die? There's no air or natural substances to erode them, Rune said as he squatted next to one of such corpses. Do you think they choked? All of the corpses looked strangely peaceful, as if they were put to sleep. It's as if they are kept in a sterile, vacuum-packed place and whatever was within their bodies just died instantly. Stella said, well, let's keep moving. The chambers eventually led to a series of long empty homes. Further in, we discovered more corpses and noticed they were not dwarves. Human corpses, elven, lizard folks. There were many races that had lived here. Lumuf and Hoya both checked out their attire and suspected that they were priests. We'd not seen Eurasian priests prior to this, but it was the dirty long, flowing robes around the floor, and the strangely preserved altars within the few buildings we passed by that suggested that this place was filled with priests. Everything seemed frozen in time. We were the only new thing to even enter this place in Eons. Look at this. Rune hopped as they reached a larger building that looked like a canteen. There were tables and chairs, cups and plates. Many were untouched, as if their denizens just died suddenly. Maybe there used to be some kind of air-producing crystals. Or something just killed all living things while leaving their bodies behind. There should be books or something. Personal belongings of these dead people. Lausanne said, do we want to do that? Really? Should we call in the archivists, so that we can at least prevent ourselves from tampering with these potentially historic artifacts? Rune said as he then wandered to one of the shelves. They were in surprisingly good condition, and within them were more cups and plates. There was a storage area behind the canteen that still contained food, stored in magically sealed containers. I'm tempted to open them. Stella looked at them. Their contents were all dried out, and the containers clearly used to have magic. Whatever magic in them faded, and its protective effects were long gone. I came expecting a dungeon, but I guess I'm happy that this isn't really a dungeon. Alka smiled, relieved. It feels more like a city, though it does seem sad that us dwarves are frequently found in such dead underground cities. There were more corpses as the domain holders reached deeper into the chambers, and we saw signs and more buildings of different functions. There were at least 10,000 corpses all over the central chamber, and we realized this area once went by a different name, Saleris, the Gate of Eras. The words were carved onto the steel walls of their largest building. So this place really was built by Eras. Evil god or divine prisoner, we were not exactly sure which. Most of the buildings were housing, some for food, and some for crafts. But then in one of the largest buildings in the heart of the chambers, there was a series of stairs that led beneath the building. At the heart of a large underground chamber was a large circular ring, with multiple control panels on a table-like platform next to it. The style and carvings were different, but it was not hard for us to know what it was. A rift gate. Alka hopped and noticed the unusual dwarven tick marks on its structure. It was made by dwarves, in some way or form. It's perfectly preserved. Stella didn't really care who made them. She instead went to the panel and quickly discovered something more important. It has the Void Sea address of the core Eurasian worlds. There's 5 of them. Edna hopped over and joined Stella to go through the details on the Eurasian gates. They were linked to 5 worlds, each named the Forge of Eras, the Crucible of Eras, the Library of Eras, the Bestiary of Eras, and the Store of Eras. The other domain holders, like Lausanne, investigated the other parts of that chamber. She soon found records. This place looks like it used to document who passed through these gates. The dates didn't make sense to us. It was a series of numbers, but because no one ever used those date conventions, we didn't know how different they were relative to us. It was like Earthings using the year 2025, while these ancient dwarves used Eurasian year 103,204. We didn't know how these two dates lined up. There's a lot of priests and warbands. And crafters, Lausanne said, reading through these historical documents. Rune looked at her and frowned. You shouldn't be touching those. They're historical, Rune said. Somehow, it was the ranger that was most sucked into the whole historical preservation movement. Alka merely frowned. If it was some other people's sacred relics and historical documents, then yes, they needed to deal with it with velvet gloves, but these things were just left here untouched for eons. Someone's got to look at them someday. Lausanne countered, and I'm using all the necessary protection. The domain holders were each equipped with special gloves, just in case we had to deal with historical objects. It was a concern I found rather silly. Adventurers entered dungeons and old ruins all the time, and concern for the preservation of their historical value was probably the last thing on our mind. We dived dungeons in order to obtain resources and materials. Lausanne ignored the bickering and then continued to read. I think there must be a diary or something somewhere. It was quite a miracle that even after so much time, the language remained readable till today. It was one of the great benefits of the system. Next to the chamber that housed the ancient rift gates was a temple. An actual gigantic temple in honor of their creator, Ares. But what was truly important was the story carved into the walls of the main chamber. The tale of the god creating the sun rings was told through painted carvings, of how the sun used to be unused. Then Ares arrived, a golden dwarven man with a golden pickaxe and tools. Here, the paint on the walls was perfectly preserved. Ares was depicted in a sheen of gold, and I wondered whether that was a motif common among all the gods. Even Hawa took the form of a golden knight. I don't think it's gold, Lausanne said to Lumuf, but she was speaking to me. It's not? I think it just appears gold, like an aura that has color. To those creating a recreation of their god, maybe gold is just the closest substitute they have to the majesty of the gods. The paintings then depicted a series of great constructions, of how metals were pulled out of nowhere, and then forged into the sun rings. Here, it was clear that the sun rings was one of many. The depictions had 6 sets of sun rings, each occupying a specific distance away from the true heart of Eurasian lands. At its center was the crucible of Ares, the heart of the Ares-controlled lands. This lines up, roughly with the map I found elsewhere, but it's stretched. Stella said, the distances are a bit off. Probably the drift over time. But that's not a good place to be. Why? Lumuf looked at her. It's where the Black Sun is. The demon's prison. Well, then why not fire up the Eurasian Riftgate and see whether we can get past? Lumuf's eyes brightened up. We could hit them quickly and bring an end to this. I can't. The barrier prevents the Eurasian gates from functioning. Stella countered. The rift gate doesn't circumvent the void barrier. Besides, do you even think we are ready for that thing? We have to be. Someday. We might as well push it and see where we land. With our immortality, I don't fear death. I fear not being able to get back. Stella countered. The demons can interfere with some domain abilities, especially if they have the power of divinity on their hands. The rest of the temple was filled with more carvings of the history of the place, and then, past the main chamber, there was a map. It was held in a crystal, and the moment Lumuf approached it, the crystal glowed. The crystal then projected a 3-dimensional magical map of Eurasian territories. There were 5 glowing lights, which I suspect represented the 5 core Eurasian worlds, and a series of other smaller worlds, all with golden yellow lights. Then, there were 6 other ring-shaped glowing lights, and with their position, we assumed them to be the 6 sun rings of Ares. Then there were places in other colors. Blue, red, green. Oh, looks like Ares made it easier for us. Oh, not just that. Stella absolutely realized what it meant. It means it's possible to travel to the other sun rings from this sun ring. The 6 sun rings form a network and are entangled together. Well, what are you waiting for? We can use the sun rings to get closer to these other colors. My gut feeling is that these are the other gods' territories. Stella gulped, unsure whether that was a good idea. But she closed her eyes briefly, and then gathered her courage. Yes, let's do it. But Hawa called for us anyway. It is ready, but come alone. As Lumuf arrived on Satria, Hawa came alone. There was not a single person here. Not in the nearest town. You're alone, this time. Lesser beings cannot stand to be in the presence of this object. Their hearts would be crushed. Keep it safe, somewhere far away and uninhabited. He held, in his golden hands, a tiny, tiny silver-colored ball, but I could tell that it contained far more divine energies than anything I'd ever seen. There were no fancy ornaments or anything. Just a single solid ball, with a small button. Even the system recognized it for the extent of power. Divine superweapon, Hawan Shieldbreaker. Made from the condensed wool of divine faith, this small silver ball contains a huge amount of energy and power of Hawa meant for breaking of the great demonic barrier. This object is capable of inflicting great destruction, destroying entire realms and realms that are nearby. In order to prevent misuse, it is now spiritually bound to Eon and the avatar Lumuf. Prior to activation, it is recommended that the entire realm is evacuated. Eon and Lumuf are able to activate the bomb remotely. Closing square bracket dot. Beautiful thing, Lumuf said. It scares me. It should. We were exploring the sun rings and found ruins dedicated to Eris. Do you remember a time when the demon lands belonged to Eris? Faintly. The position of our worlds shifted, and I hardly interacted with that god. Do you think he is evil? I do not subscribe to the term all that much. Even if my priests preach it every day. Evil is relative. The concepts of morality very much depend on the nature of each world and its societies. They are meaningless to someone outside that society. I am not here to debate on philosophy today. Lumuf smiled as Hawa stepped closer. Perhaps I should be more specific. Do you think Eris wanted to destroy the known world? For that, I do not think so. Eris was a god of experimentation and discovery. Knowledge. Maybe his curiosity caused him to create things he shouldn't have, but I do not believe a god so devoted to discovery and knowledge sought to destroy the world. That is good to hear. At least, maybe the demons are just some experiment gone wrong. Perhaps, a series of divine experiments gone wrong, by multiple gods. Hawa continued. Perhaps it is not Eris who created them, but they had somehow managed to usurp or control Eris' power. Hawa finally handed the ball to Lumuf, and even he handled it gently, as if it was the most fragile thing in the world. To crush a demonic comet, I use 1/20th of what's needed for this. Hawa repeated. This weapon can annihilate entire realms and some, maybe more. Use it for the barrier and nothing else. I leave the choice of when to use it to you. It is registered to your spirit, so that no one else can use it. Are you ready for what we will unleash on the world? Lumuf held the ball in his hand and felt like his spirit was warped by the amount of power in it. No, but we will deal with what comes. End the status quo, Eon. Lumuf looked at the ball, and we shared a swirling dilemma in our heart. When do we destroy the barrier? 333. Dangerous Woods. 333. Year 308. We're not ready. I said. I knew we were not. I felt like I needed more than a few more levels. The fact that Hawa could have a weapon so powerful was all the difference in power levels I needed to know. Hawa could deal with whatever the demons could dish out. Not just that, Hawa was in a better position now, because now he had 15 less peripheral worlds to care for, and thus, his faith points would grow quite quickly. He could make something that annihilated entire worlds every 20 years. The weapon was so powerful that the only safe place to store it was on my clone on Comedworld. It was a rather interesting way to use a stray uninhabited comet as the superweapon's storage area. But the question didn't leave my mind. Could I deal out that sort of damage? My domain holders recognized the gap in power, but Alka disagreed that waiting was the right choice. They are on the world faith system. They do not get stronger as they defeat the demons. But we do. If there are stronger demon kings on the other side, then we stand to benefit in the long term, if we can keep defeating more demon kings and whatever stronger demon emperors or whatnot that they have at their disposal. We gain levels, and the more we defeat the demons, the better positioned we are. Edna agreed. Let's give ourselves a time limit. If we wait, we will wait forever. Let's explore the 5 other sun rings in their vicinity, talk to the other gods, and see whether we can get them to all help out. At least, if we talk to some of them, we will know where they stand with the demons. The ancient Eurasian gates whirled to life once sufficient void mana was channeled into it, and there were a total of 10 preset locations. The 5 other sun rings and the 5 Eurasian core worlds. We decided not to send everyone. Just in case. Only Lumoof, Edna, and Stella. Just enough to get everyone through and for Stella to earn the levels needed to reach level 200. 3 of us once more. Lumoof smiled as the portal brought them through to a rift gate, which opened to another rift gate on the other side. Unlike before, the rift gate brought them directly into the underground chambers of the sun rings. Again, it was a space devoid of any life. There were corpses everywhere, dwarves, humans, and more. But there was a difference. A few, in fact. This corpse looks like it used void mana. Stella sat and noticed very noticeable burns from void mana. These were void curses, something suffered by young void mages as they attempted to change their souls into one that produced void mana. If those curses were not removed from the soul, they led to dark, black root-like scars throughout the body. She flipped the corpse over and noticed the presence of some unusual tools and equipment on her body. "Rune's gonna tell you to treat that thing gently," Edna teased, but she too spread out of the main Eurasian gate chamber and out into the actual temple. "He's not here," Stella said, "and this isn't an Eurasian logo. I mean, I'm not surprised if the ancients tried to use void mana. When the sun rings produced so much of them. This temple also had a similar carving as the ones before. It depicted Era's carving and creating the sun rings out of planets once more, but instead, there was another god present. Era's was depicted in strong, almost yellowish gold, but this other one was depicted in a far lighter color, a faint golden color, with a sigil on its body. "There's another god involved in the sun rings," Edna said as she continued to admire the carved illustrations of the sun rings creation on the temple's walls. Stella quickly joined Edna and connected the sigils. "Well, so that void mage is this other god's believers. For the use of the rift gates?" Edna just added. She didn't believe it. There's a god that does rift gates? That doesn't quite make sense. The Eurasian gates themselves don't seem to need help from others, though. Eon isn't a god of rift gates, but that's not stopping him from using them. Stella continued to read the same carvings herself. "Does it have a name? I can't see any." Edna tried to check around, but didn't see any. There was a statue in honor of Eras. Meanwhile, Lumoof was already outside. The chambers were probably once home to at least 10,000, if not more. Most of them were priests and crafters of Eras. He searched, and eventually, we found a set of notebooks that was somehow readable. There were many books that somehow decayed despite the lack of air in these chambers. A notebook left by a crafter that was long dead. We didn't find the crafter's corpse, which we hoped meant that he managed to get out of the sun rings. It's been 20 years since I started work on these gigantic rings, and living in these deep chambers was strange. Everything here had to be created by the mages and priests. My shift should last until the end of the year, and I look forward to my return to the Crucible. Crucible, that's the core world mentioned on the Eurasian gates. Stella interrupted Lumoof's reading. Lumoof glared at her, and she quickly shut up. The High Priest of Eras claims that there has to be sufficient people living in these rings in order for Eras to exert his divine powers. This is the 4th ring, and as I understood it, Eras intended to construct 6 of them. 6 to convert these sun's energies into void mana and send them back to the Crucible. For what purpose, the Eurasian priests refuse to elaborate, though I get the sense that they don't know about it, either. Even now, there is a dark object that loomed over the Crucible. A creation of Eras himself, the Great Void Sun. Few know how many centuries it will take for such a creation to be completed. Eras created the Void Sun. Stella gasped. Doesn't this mean Eras created the demons? But the demons are much earlier than the Void Sun. Lumoof frowned. I don't think we can draw such a direct link from the Void Sun to the demons. Why not? The Void Sun powers the Demon Kings. If anything, it is the Void Sun that seeds each Demon King with that final bit of power. Maybe in some ways, yes. Lumoof decided maybe Stella had a point. If Eras is the one imprisoned, then the demons must have turned on itself. Or it is an experiment gone wrong. Not the first time the gods thought too highly of themselves and then got boxed in by the limitations of whatever they created. Edna decided to add her view in. You really think so? Stella ran around the temple like an excited child, trying to figure out whether she missed anything. Tell me if you see anything juicy. Meanwhile, Lumoof continued to read the notebooks. The rest of the notebooks contained mostly descriptions of home. It seemed to be a diary kept by the crafter to document the work he did, which was to maintain the various machineries used to clean the sun ring's surface. A diary of a dwarven crafter who maintained multiple machines throughout the world. But as Lumuf read more and more, we eventually figured out why there were priests and crafters. There used to be an Eurasian relic on each of the sun rings. The crafters and priests were here to pray and maintain the relic. The relic was a massive machine that extended the god's reach, an object called the Eurasian spiritual engine. Lumuf finished the book. Let me look for more. That is Hawa able to do that? Maybe, just maybe, any relic could do it. Surely if Ares could do it, then all the gods could as well. Where was that relic supposed to be, anyway? The relic should have been on top of the temple, but instead, there was nothing there. The temple was a large structure, and the relic would have been on its roof. Yet, it was somehow so cleanly destroyed that now, all that remained was just a massive empty area filled with bodies. There were quite a few bodies. There was a battle here. It's amazing that the debris from the battle is still here, somehow. Edna, being the main combatant of the three, squatted on the temple's roof as she checked for clues. It's likely some really powerful divine weapon. Even now there's still some faintly divine presence. Another god. Great. If it's not Ares, then another god. Edna frowned. I am beginning to suspect that someone destroyed these relics. Why? Power struggle between the gods, perhaps? Stella groaned. Really? We're at the stage where we're going to be challenging a god? Lumuf and Edna both laughed. I mean, we are going to head towards the demon's black sun that holds a god. Were you expecting something different? Stella's face flushed red as she realized how stupid she sounded. Oh, I suppose when you put it that way. Anyway, there should be a crater or something left on the other sun rings. Lausanne and the other domain holders also investigated the temple's roof on the first sun ring and also found it empty. It was so cleanly destroyed that somehow nothing remained, not even a crater. Or maybe it was stolen. But nothing else. After almost 3 weeks inside the chambers of the second pair of sun rings, the domain holders were almost done. They'd collected hundreds of books, equipment, and all sorts of artifacts for the archivists to study. The researchers were already backlogged from the materials from the first sun rings, and now they had another set. The surface of sun rings 2 wasn't quite like what we expected. A gigantic golden sun where its magical energies was somehow turned into void mana, compressed into a beam, and fired towards the barrier. Do you think you can survive that jet of void mana? Lumuf asked Edna. No. That jet of void mana looks enough to poison an entire world. Even with our domain's strength and my abilities, I think that's too much. I mean, that jet of void mana could be our way to pierce through the barrier. Could, but it's like asking a regular mortal to jump down a waterfall, somehow make it through an underground river, and make it out alive. Not recommended, but Sun Rings 2 was on another side of the Void Sea. Very, very far from where we were. Stella joined us too, and as she scanned the Void Sea from our new location, she looked horrified. There are 2 demonic comets in the Void Sea. Where are they headed? I can't see their final destination. I don't have a map of this part of the Void Sea. The Eurasian gates didn't have it? No, only the 10 presets. Great. Wanna do some hopping? Edna asked. Or should we hit the other 4 sun rings? Lumuf intervened. Why are both of you looking at me? Stella looked upset. You're the Void Mage. You're the only one who can work the portals and rift gates. Naturally, you should decide. She stopped for a while. I think we have time to visit all the sun rings before we start exploring these other places. Let's go. Sun Rings 3 and Sun Rings IV were fairly similar to Sun Rings 2, with many dead bodies and many more books and documents to analyze. The carvings of these sun rings didn't show that other god, only Ares. On these 2 worlds, the temples were similarly attacked, but the fact that there were only battles on the temple's roof suggested that this was somehow an inside job. There were traitors from within the Eurasian church, or someone close to them. But there were also notebooks and records, and this was where we learned the name of the other god. These Wadran priests and people give me the creeps. A diary of an Eurasian dwarven priest wrote in a notebook found on Sun Rings IV. Their use of void magic that poisons their skin gives them a short life, and yet their god keeps them alive, somehow. It feels as if they are enslaved to their gods by the pain and spiritual bindings of their void magic. I still don't know why Eurasian priests were tasked to help them, and why they were asked to give them space in their world. Yet, their god must love them, because the chief of the Wadran priest is coded in divine power, quite like the chosen ones of Eris. But the Wadran officials and priests left no records or documents. All they had were sigils, tools, and weapons. Well, godly struggle seems like a candidate. Stella frowned. You think so? Let me ask Hawa about Wadra. Lumuf decided. Wadra? Yes. We're exploring the Eurasian ruins and discovered some hints about Wadra. Wadra should be dead, Hawa answered. When? I do not recall. But his death came after the demons spread. How do you know of his death? I no longer detected his faith's presence in any of the peripheral worlds or my world. There was a time when his cursed children were everywhere. That doesn't sound like a confirmation. There is no confirmation that a god died. Merely the disappearance of his faith. Could it be that Wadra is the one that's within the Black Sun? Possible. Who is Wadra? An old god of the nomads, golems, formations, rocks and stones, earth magic, and void magic. Earth magic? Was he an enemy of the gods? No, not my enemy, at least. I do not know whether they fought against the other gods, but the Wadran children are travelers. They can walk the worlds and used to walk with the Zaradans as well, though the way they use the void magic is quite different from yours. They shapeshift in order to swim in the void seas. They shapeshift? Yes. What else do you know of them? Not much, only that they disappeared. They used to be everywhere, and those blessed by Wadra could transform into powerful creatures. When they used to roam, I blocked them from entering my core worlds, but they sometimes still appear in my peripheral worlds and are fairly harmless, unless provoked. I see. Why is there no mechanism to tell whether a god lives or dies? I do not know. Perhaps, an oversight from us and the old gods. We discovered that Eris created the Black Sun. Really? That is a surprise. It is carved on the Sun Ring's temples, and that is how we discovered the Wadran presence. Wadra is a wandering god. His center shifts all the time, and as a result, he too moves with his people. He may have just wandered to the Eurasian worlds during that time. But I do not have insight into what happened. When did the barrier appear? I do not know. It is beyond my range of sight. I do not comprehend how something so powerful can happen without the gods knowing. I vented. It was frustrating how little the gods knew about things outside their area. It was as if each god only cared about their own little carved-out section of the world, oblivious to everything else. But then I remembered that I am the same. It was just me on a larger, planetary scale too. I did not pay much attention to those outside my sphere of influence. Our powers are localized. 334. Outside rings. Year 309. A demon king. It's something that hardly draws much attention these days. Not the fanfare or the anxiety or the intense planning from their earlier days. Everything was fairly standardized. There were pre-made packs of magical explosives, 2 boxes of magical sensors to confirm the Demon King's arrival location, and many more other tools meant to soften their foe. The air shifted. Lausanne stood and she could feel, through Eon, the warping of space. The road through the void sea, created by the demons to 3-ringed world, loomed overhead. Even though the Order had fulfilled its obligations to Hawa for the new divine weapon, the Demon King remained a great source of experience, and hence, she remained to face it. Her spear thrummed with power, as star mana flowed through the weapon. It was strong and could grow even stronger. She could hear its voice in her head, a sign of their bond. A living weapon, linked to her. She looked around. There were a few of her peers. Some preparing, some just lazing about waiting for the moment. Are you seriously still holding onto your choices? Lausanne said to Aben. Feels like you're coming to this fight with one of your hands behind your back. I am not beyond foolish behavior, milady. Aben smiled. Allow me to indulge in such silliness. Lausanne would have scolded him if he wasn't a domain holder. But with Eon's resurrection ability, all he wasted really was time. His time. Aben himself didn't seem to think it was much of a waste. Well, if you say so. Edna, Lumuf and Stella were far away on the various sun rings, and that left the rest of the Demon Kings in their hands. There were no node trees on the 3-ringed world, and so the heroes couldn't be here to help. But they were enough. They knew they were. The Demon King emerged from the broken barriers of reality, where the two worlds are briefly tied together by a magical tube. A wave of explosions quickly softened the Demon King, and Lausanne's star mana-powered attacks were next. Well, keep the Demon King occupied. Got it, got it. Her spear slammed into the Demon King's body like a powerful projectile, and the gigantic Demon King staggered backwards. She felt nice. Her attacks visibly hurt the Demon King, and each of her strikes left a mark. Even her colleagues, like Rune and Johann, who were higher leveled, didn't hurt the Demon King as much as she did. The Demon King died eventually. Even without Edna, Lumuf, or Stella, there were still too many domain holders against a Demon King that was fairly average in terms of strength. An uneventful death, and for most of them, 1 or 2 levels. But they were increasing in power. Aben could gain levels, even if he didn't make a choice. Lausanne found that rather strange, but then again, the system sometimes awarded multiple levels at one go. There was no reason to lock them just because he didn't make a choice. The Eurasian Temple of the Sun Rings V was in the worst condition of any of the 6. It was a massive crater ruined by tremendous explosions, and it was a surprising miracle that Eurasian rift gates somehow survived. There were multiple battles here. The walls of these underground chambers still bore their ancient scars. Huge wrecks, and then, the 3 domain holders felt the system's notification, and in Stella's case, she felt the swirl of void mana right above the wrecked temple. Then, she even felt the system's warning. Demon King Defender arriving. A small Demon King arrived, the size of a small, dwarven creature, and it smashed into Edna's shields the moment it completed its warp. Well, where did you come from? The small Demon King seemed perfectly designed to counter humanoid heroes, and its dark axes were charged with void mana. Edna and the Demon King exchanged blows a few times, before Lumuf and Stella quickly stepped in. No, you don't. Lumuf countered, and a huge explosion of vines wrapped around the Demon King. Edna's own swords and spears slammed into the Demon King, and 3 against 1 wasn't a fair fight. The creature attempted to struggle, but my vines were too strong for it. It shot multiple magical energy blasts that attacked the walls, or smashed into Edna's shields. I wasn't prepared to convert it at this point, as I'd not made the preparations for one, so we decided to just crush it. The creature crumbled to dust once our vines wrapped around the Demon King's core and crushed it. The 6th Sun Rings was in a fairly terrible state, and the underground chambers weren't completely underground. Instead, there were 5 large holes clearly caused by some catastrophic battle that linked the underground chambers to the surface of the Sun Rings. The 3 continued to walk and survey the area, before a voice interrupted them. Survivors? The voice came from a building. Edna's senses were heightened, and she immediately turned the moment she heard it. I heard something from that building. The other 2 nodded, and there, in a half-collapsed building, there was a suit of metal armor resting on a still glowing magical pattern. The handiwork of the shining metal armor was excellent, as if made by Ares himself. Lumuf's spiritual eyes could see a spirit living within the armor. And so he squatted in front of the metal armor. I know you're in there. I can see spirits lingering within. The helmet's visor snapped open to reveal just a glowing eye. You can see me? Yes. I said I can, didn't I? Lumuf smiled as his eyes continued to investigate the magical formations that kept the magical armor charged. It likely didn't generate much magical energy, since the entire area was flooded with void mana. What are you, and what happened here? I am Rukron, an Eurasian Sentinel rank 3. There was a battle here against the invading demons. The demons invaded this place? Was it always like this? No. My records cannot be accessed at this moment, and I was asleep for an unknown amount of time. The spiritual formations were only barely enough to keep me alive, and so A mana potion? Edna offered, suspecting the lack of magical energy prevented full recollection of its memories. The suit of armor grabbed the mana potion, and extended a finger into the glass container. Once it touched the mana-dense liquids, it somehow drained it through touch. The entire suit of armor was immediately rejuvenated, and so it stood up. My apologies, and thank you. I have not had a full charge in a long time. Lumuf saw the creature's spirit expand to fill the entirety of the armor. Well, would you come with us and tell us what happened? What is the history of this place? I am a creation of Ares, our almighty lord. Rukron answered. We and my many brothers were placed here. on Sun Rings Alpha, for deployment to the rest of the Sun Rings. But alas, a great shadow emerged while we were all asleep. When that shadow faded and we awoke to find the entirety of the inner chambers dead. We attempted to make contact with the rest of the Eurasian worlds but were unable to do so. Then, those demonic creatures attacked us. Your brothers? There are many suits of armor like me, and 10 of them are far stronger than me. They are the Sentinel elites, and they can fight toe-to-toe with even the strongest of those demons. It is their battle with these foul creatures that left the entire chamber in its current state. Rukron answered as they stepped outside. I was on hibernation to recharge myself after the battles. Most of the inner chambers were destroyed. The battles were clearly furious because there was not a single untouched building. Who is Ares? Ares is my creator. He is my god, and if you want further information you must visit the Crucible of Ares or the Library of Ares. It is there we retain most of the Eurasian lores. If it remains, it must remain. Rukron answered. How many years were you left here? I estimate between 10 to 15,000 years. Rukron answered. I was in a long period of hibernation. Fine. 10 to 15,000 years and no one attempted to make contact with the Sun Rings. That is not a good sign. Stella concluded, and then as we reached the far end of the inner chambers, we stopped as we felt something coming from one of the gigantic holes in the wall. The three glanced at each other. And then we walked further inside to find a wrecked suit of armor far larger than Rukron. It still retained a faint divine presence. Brother Jorkin, are you there? Rukron walked to the wrecked suit of armor and immediately touched it. The three felt an immediate transfer of magical energies between Rukron and the wrecked suit of armor. The stone shook momentarily, as the pieces of the wrecked suit of armor began to float and reconstituted themselves into a far larger suit of armor. Do you mind sharing more mana potions? Rukron asked. Brother Jorkin needs a lot more mana. Edna checked her magical pouch and tossed 3 more over. The bottles of mana were emptied just by touch, and now there were 2 of them. I am Jorkin, Eurasian Sentinel Elite. The newly reconstituted giant war armor was far larger, and already Edna could see what caused the huge battle. The faint divine energies in the armor somehow regained their divinity, and the spiritual fragment that was once a small, tiny flicker now covered the entire armor. I thank you for the magical replenishments. Has the intruder been dealt with? Yup, Edna answered. Are you free from the outer Eurasian worlds? Your features appear to be human and should only be found in the outer worlds. Jorkin asked, as the war armor began to walk. My magical scanners are unable to fully read your strength, and there appears to be the presence of the other gods. Are you 3 divine representatives? Sort of. Now more importantly, what happened here? I believe we can help each other. Brother Jorkin is great for helping. He has far more stored memories of the Eurasian worlds and records about Eurasian ways. Rukron answered enthusiastically. Lumuf's spiritual senses continued to inspect the two, and we realized they were not artificial souls, even if they spoke strangely. They were both complete souls, even if their forms were slightly different. The more we looked at it, the more we felt that both of them were likely made by Ares by hand. Jorkin, why were you sent here? An unknown number of years ago, I estimate between 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, Ares felt that there was a need for stronger defenses on the 6 great solar rings, and so created us, the 10 Sentinel elites and the 2,000 Sentinels rank 1 to 3, for deployment on each of the 6 great solar rings. What is the purpose of solar rings? Stella asked. They are gigantic mana generators to create a huge void mana sun. Ares and the wandering god Wadra intended to restore the connection between the gods, and do so with a network of Eurasian gates to be placed on all the different worlds. Wadra's creatures and nomadic believers would take the Eurasian gates with them, and with the void sun at its heart, rebuild the long-lost connection between the various worlds. The 3 domain holders stared at each other. So the black sun is a gigantic battery to power the Eurasian gates? Yes. The solar rings would feed the void sun and also act as great beacons for each of the Eurasian gates' internal coordinates. Do you believe that there is a possibility that Ares created the demons? My patron and creator would do no such thing. Jorkin answered firmly. The demons have been around for a long time. But at this moment, the demons have somehow supplanted the void sun and have now used the void sun to spread the demons. Lumuf said, while our senses continued to probe the thing. Jorkin appears to be unfazed. Just like the demon king that now intrudes on the solar rings. Jorkin started to speak, but then it stopped. It stopped and looked around. Then later, it glanced upwards at the great sun rings. It appears, then, that we have been misled. Misled? We were told that the demons were a plague that was spreading across the worlds, and our Lord Creator Ares believed it. But if you claim that the void sun is now used to power the demons' spread, then I can only say that the Wadra's faithful are behind this, because only their god and that god's closest aides are familiar with the ways of the solar rings and the grand magical void latticework. We have never heard of the Wadrans before this. Lumuf countered. They are a fading band. I can only theorize that they have used us to arrest their fading powers. The three domain holders shared a look, and we wondered how trustworthy this Jorkin was. Then who created the demons? Wadra? Demons have existed since the first gods. This form that uses the void sun's power to spread, are not these original demons. You managed to come to the solar rings, are you able to travel to the others? I wish to see more of these demons. And verify my conjectures. Stella looked at the suit of armor and then at Lumuf. Should we? No harm. Is there a demon world nearby? There should be one. Yup. Stella nodded, and so a portal of void opened, connecting their present location to the nearest planet. It was a demon-infested world. The three domain holders and the two suits of armor landed on it. Rukron, stand down. Jorkin commanded. Non-combat mode. We are here to scout and verify. If we are the last two sentinels remaining, then we must survive to bring news back to Ares. So Ares lives? I am a creation of Ares, and if I live, Ares must as well. Jorkin answered as he moved quickly to tear apart a few of the demons. But it did so as if trying to investigate their structures. It seems my conjecture is incomplete. My current conjecture still believes that the Wadrans started this, but these demons do not contain any Wadran influence in them. If anything, it is likely that the Wadrans lost control over the demonic horde. A runaway creation of a god. Lumuf frowned. Wadra, as far as I knew, did not seek to destroy the world. If I extrapolate their past behavior, at most, they seek to rule it. The destructive tendencies of these demons do not support Wadran control. Well, nothing's changed then. But so, the void sun. Is that where your god is stored? Would you know how to break this barrier? Jorkin glanced upward from the surface of the demonic world, and the void barrier was a large black sheet that made a portion of the sky pitch black. A portion of the sky, starless and dark. No, but the Eurasian worlds are behind them. I can feel them there. We must reach them. Do you think we can believe it? Lumuf asked me through our connection. I don't know, but it doesn't change what we need to do. We must reach the black sun and end the demonic scourge that plagues so many worlds. We can let it remain on these sun rings while we venture further. With the 6 sun rings explored, now our attention shifted to the worlds around these 5 other sun rings. From sun rings IV, we were able to reach a part of the void sea that was further away from us. A world inhabited by the believers of Gaia, and behind that world, many more Gaian worlds. Well, let's go make contact with a god. Stella said, I hope it's friendly. 335. Divine Councils. Year 310. Gaia Periphery World. It wasn't hard for us to figure out that these were peripheral worlds, because though Gaia was the dominant religion of these worlds, there were still some believers of the other gods. Hawa, Ava, and Nera worshippers are still featured in small, minority numbers. Gaia itself also splintered into 2 main faiths, the doctrinate Gaian and the spiritual Gaians, and interestingly, they fought with each other more than they did against the other minority faiths. I believed this sort of schism in the faith would not be permitted on any of the core worlds. It was, unsurprisingly, very much a normal magical medieval world, and it was the 2 great faiths of the world that controlled the world. The strength of those on Gaia's periphery was relatively weak, and they were also invaded by demons fairly regularly, around every 40 to 50 years. But we were not here to help, and they were not looking for help. We were here to look for a god. So their domestic affairs mattered little to us. If anything, it is for Gaia to solve. I do not know whether it is possible to summon Gaia for an audience. The high priest of the spiritual Gaians swore in his audience room, but Lumuf's aura was enough to convince him of the seriousness of the message for Gaia. Gaia communicates with us whenever it wants to. Pray to him. Tell them that there are other gods looking to speak to him about the demons. Lumuf said firmly. Say that we will move further in to look for him. I will try. But nothing happened. We decided to move further in. Gaia Inner Periphery World. The inner peripheral world of Gaia resembled quite like any other, and here, Gaia was dominant. On the other hand, worship of Gaia itself was again splintered into two. The northern Gaia and the southern Gaia faiths both worshipped the same god and both had their own council of priests. Lumuf figured that any god that allowed such schism must be located quite distant from their main god, and so we didn't dwell too long. Maybe it was just easier that way. Still, we noticed that the demons' invasions were getting rare, only about once every 50 to 70 years, and when that happened, Gaia would usually summon about 5 to 10 heroes. These human heroes would then follow the usual path, though in most cases, the heroes died and things went back to normal. Even when they lived, most heroes don't live very long, usually another 10 or 20 years to go. There was something rather suspicious about their deaths. The heroes supposedly died in their sleep. It should have been impossible for heroes to die in their sleep, given their exceptional physical health and all that. So, we knew something was up. But alas, we didn't linger to check. We moved further and closer to the Gaia world. We dropped by 6 more Gaia peripheral worlds, each stretching Stella's abilities as far as we could. Gaian presence in these worlds were all fairly similar. As the dominant religion, it seemed Gaia's priests were strongest in these worlds, but also, they were all fragmented. In one of the worlds, Gaia was split into 3 sub-factions, even though they were still nominally a single faith. In others, it was outright civil war between splintered religions. We also noticed that Stella's range of teleports began to shrink. There was a wave pushing back at us. A divine current. That meant we had to spend more void mana just to travel the same distance. It was an interesting mechanism to restrict demonic travel in this manner. Of course, this wave wasn't really targeted against us, but against all forms of void-based travel. There's a comet that's headed somewhere, Stella observed. It was still moving, very very slowly, but the waves of the divine current in the void sea were pushing against the comet. Lumuf found the mechanism of pushing against the void sea in this manner fascinating. I suppose this is one of Gaia's countermeasures against a comet-like event. Can we hop to the next world? Yeah, I think we can still go for another one. Gaia middle world I middle world. The signs were obvious once we remembered what we felt when we were through Hawa's lands. The subtle, permeating sense that there was a god watching us, and our presence was like a rock that disturbed the once endless calm. Gaia's priests were in high alarm, and the first encounter was not at all friendly. There were small platoons of relatively powerful Gaia warriors who departed in search of us. These were Gaian blessed, with weapons that were enchanted by priests. Not enough to be relics, but enough that they were strong enough to deal with monsters around the level of demon champions. They couldn't see us, and we snuck through these defenses easily. Should we just pop up? Stella smiled. Maybe they'll just take us to Gaia. Do you think it's so easy? Yes, Stella said. I'll send us to a different Gaia world if it doesn't work out. It's not as if they could hurt you. Lumuf thought on her suggestion for a bit, and realized Stella had a point. Gaia does appear to appreciate some honesty. And so, Lumuf appeared before the Gaia champions. They attacked immediately, only to find that none of their attacks harmed my avatar. Just on stats alone he was so strong that he shrugged off all the attacks, and his sheer presence made them stagger. Hello, and thanks for the warm, passionate greeting, Lumuf said as their champions gathered their blessed weapons and lunged once more. The attacks all did nothing, and they stared in disbelief. Take me to your most blessed place, and I wish to speak to your god. They attacked once more. Lumuf stood as if he was the mountain, and they were the wailing winds. They attacked repeatedly, each of their strikes bouncing off his flesh and protective shields. Impossible, they declared. You must not be real. This is an illusion. Oh, Lumuf grabbed one of them with his vines, and then he gripped one of their shoulders with his arm. This is an illusion? Stella and Edna were just amused and teased. Stop bullying them already. They're just not used to this. Lumuf focused on them. I want to speak to Gaia. Where do I go? The man that Lumuf grabbed wailed and tried to escape. The temple of the highest spire. Where is this temple? Lumuf's arm was like the vice grip of God, and no matter how hard the man tried he couldn't free himself. His teammates tried attacking some more, but all that did was slam into more shields. The temple is on the Heaven's Bay, it sits to the direction of the rising sun, past 22 distance markers. What does this temple look like? It's the tallest tower along the bay. You can't miss it. The man still struggled as he answered. Good. Who do I find to speak to Gaia? Lumuf said, as he weaved his priestly powers into his words. The man could speak no lie in his presence. It was said that some priests had power to compel the truth. Confession. Speak no lie before divinity. Some domain holders learned how to use their sheer presence to do so, without need for any skill. On the tower there's a statue of Gaia. You need a priest. A high priest and a ceremony to summon Gaia. The man flailed, but there was nothing he could do. Great. Which high priest, and what's the name of this ceremony? Lumuf said. His teammates screamed at him. Stop talking. We can't reveal such secrets to outsiders. His teammates attacked, but they all just bounced off Lumuf's shields. The man looked like his head was in intense pain, but then he was helpless. Find the Great Circle priests. The ceremony is called the Heavenly Communion. Great, thank you. Lumuf smiled and let the man go. The man looked so horrified at what he did that he wanted to kill himself there and then. Now, don't go killing yourself. If you do that I'll have to. The man clearly was so upset that he had somehow betrayed his own faith that he attempted to stab himself. Lumuf frowned. There's really no need to go to such extremes, is there? Patrick, can you work your magic? Yes. At that moment, Lumuf's avatar form extended my Titan's range temporarily, and through him, the Titan's mind-altering abilities smashed into all of them. All of them fell asleep there and then. They would remember that something altered their minds, but whatever happened would not be remembered. A shame. Yes. The Great Circle priests looked horrified, but they were willing to accept the instruction. They were fairly strong priests, and their divine presence protected them from the effects of Lumuf's domain a little. Heavenly Communion is a sacred art that requires a great deal of sacrifice. It wasn't hard for Lumuf to just pop up in their room and talk to them. The Great Circle priests were pretty much similar to the Hawan High priests and even had fairly similar markings. It was amusing how similar priests were, even though they had different gods. Make it happen, Lumuf declared. The Great Circle priests, like Hawa's Olivia, seemed to have a greater understanding that there were powers beyond theirs. I wondered whether this was part and parcel of a priest's education. Or maybe, indirectly, through their connection to the gods, they obtained a certain type of instinct to react? The other Great Circle priests tried to intervene, at first, then when they saw and felt Lumuf, they realized they were in no position to oppose. And so, the Great Circle priests of Gaia stood around a statue of a woman holding a stick and called on their god. They sacrificed 3 animals and began to sing. The holy energies of the great priests gathered around the statue, and the statue began to glow gold. Then, the statue itself came to life, as a form shrouded in gold, holding a golden stick with an orb at its tip, and wore a mask that resembled the endless swirling water. I am summoned. Gaia spoke. Speak your request, my faithful. This one wishes to speak to you. He claims to be from another world and has something to say about the demons. The priest said, I felt the strength of divinity, and it felt similar to Ava and Hawa. So, Lumuf returned it with a full reveal of our own divine presence. Our powers met in the statue itself, as the air was charged with the conflicting energies. The priests all paled, and Lumuf spoke. It's best if the rest of you leave. Gaia stared back at Lumuf, and then, my avatar formed. An avatar of one who reached the 3rd step. Where are you from and what do you want? I quickly introduced ourselves, spoke of our goals to attack the demon lands, and that we had come to seek assistance. Gaia said nothing, and then, these matters should be spoken elsewhere. Come. The golden form of Gaia transformed once more. This time, a golden portal appeared right in the chambers. Well, let's go? The 3 domain holders stepped through the portal. Gaia Inner Core World, the true Gaia world. We had never used divine portals up until now, but it seemed that Stella had done so in the past. This felt like the portals the heroes used when we first came to the world. The portal allowed the 3 to travel through a tunnel filled with golden light, and it was very different from the void portals. When we landed, we arrived at a beautiful golden chamber located amongst the clouds. A city on the clouds itself, and we could feel the intense divine laws of the world attempt to exert its control over us. It didn't. They merely bounced off our domains, but once more, it was a reminder we were in a land that would fight against us, if Gaia so willed it. We saw around us flying warriors riding on golden-colored creatures. The world was filled with power. Gaia itself, transformed. Here, a stronger version of Gaia appeared before us. This is one of my core worlds, where my strength is at its peak. Gaia spoke, the small stick transformed into a long, ornate battlestaff. Gaia took the form of a woman here. She wore a golden robe, made of a chainmail-like material, a golden wolf mask, and golden pauldrons filled with wolf-like motifs. I'd always wanted to see what a core world is like. I answered and did not feel coward. The world never stopped trying to impose its will, and I could see and feel how it drained us, even if indirectly. It was harder on Stella than Edna or Lumuf. But it is a beautiful place. Looked quite like a fairy tale world. From what we know, the Gaian myths were fairly typical. Gaia proclaimed himself, in some worlds where it took the form of a man, to be the creature of the world, and the god of all things. Closer to the peripheral worlds, Gaian myths were slightly different. Gaia was shown as the dual gods, both reflecting a male and female form. A beastly and a spirit form. Gaian myth claimed that it was Gaia that made beasts into men, it was the bridge of wisdom and intelligence. The god of transformation, of beast and men. Beasts prayed to Gaia to hopefully one day transcend their beastly forms, while the men prayed to Gaia for the ancient strengths of the beasts. Even gods that were on the world faith system had a focus. A field of mastery where it cost them less faith points to do things and to act. Perhaps they could even do so for free. Does it impress you? Gaia asked. Lumuf nodded. I agreed and answered. My voice echoed here. The divine energies of the world seem to recognize mine as a divine presence as well. It does. Fairy tales are rare. Perhaps, these types of city views are impossible outside of the core worlds of the old gods. So I turned to Gaia. Hawa claims you are the oldest of us all. And so you may know of the origins of the demons and the god that is within the Black Sun. Oh, you spoke to the one who still pretends to be the god of the divine flames? Gaia said with a strange chuckle. I am often amused that he survived these demons. The demons are no match for the gods in their core worlds. I said, but we've reached close to the demon's barrier, and so we are now considering how to destroy it. But first, what are we dealing with? Hawa doesn't know? Yes. The demons that you see now are not the original demons of the world. They are mutants, a divine plague, created by the one who suffered the most from the changing mechanisms of faith. Oh? I wondered whether it would be Eris, or the new god we've learned about on the sun rings, Wadra. Who might this be? The details are lost. Gaia answered. I suspect there was a traitor amongst us when we, the old gods, made the world faith system, because all of us could not remember who created the current version of the demons. A binding that made us forget, hidden somewhere in the great new system. I didn't know whether Gaia had a reason to lie. But I decided I wasn't going to have it. Perhaps it is Wadra? Or Eris? Eris? No. That nut job is too busy building things to destroy us. Gaia laughed. But I suppose he is the type of nut job that made things just because he could, not because he should. So, mayhaps, maybe he had a hand in meddling the demons' ways. Oh, tell us then, what do you know of the demons? What is it that we fight? I remember that the original demons did not possess the ability to traverse the world. Instead, they were created by the system and were meant to be in existence within it. There used to be a time when the world had classes like demonologist and demon summoners, because the old mortals could form pacts with the ancient demons. These images of demons are written into the system as a false counterpart to our divinity. Ah, much like the magical summons. Very much so, Gaia said. Its current form is a corrupted mutant, a hive mind ruled by nothing, with no desire beyond the annihilation of all mortal worlds, to supplant the system and remake it in its will. Which god contributed to this transformation, I do not recall. Mayhaps, I am not supposed to recall, as a traitor amongst us wanted it so. Then, do you know of Wadra? The nomadic shapeshifters? Are they not dead yet? I faintly remember from eons ago, that the first mutant demons chased after these nomadic shapeshifters through the stars. And consumed all of them. Eris and Wadra worked together to build the sun rings. Do you know why, and what it is for? I pushed. No, I do not look into what that nutjob builds. He builds new things every time someone mentions him. Did you meet him? No, but I wonder whether either Ares or Wadra is the one trapped within the Black Sun. There was a long, long silence. Gaia walked around the room as if thinking, and yet I did not think gods had a physical form. If anything, this was just an anchor. The one we saw and spoke to before us, an apparition, a spiritual incarnation of Gaia. Gaia, as a god, existed as a spiritual mass between worlds. Hawa claimed all world faith gods were the same. Their physical form was nothing more than a tool to deal with mortals. So, Gaia pacing around was thoroughly unnecessary. I fear it is more likely Ares is within the Black Sun. I see. Is he a friend? Me and Ares? No. Will you aid us to attack the Black Sun? Aid? Perhaps. If the situation improves and I have men to spare. Gaia answered. Perhaps more likely, that you will find my assistance only when you really need it. In this game of gods and demons, I would prefer more concrete statements of support. I countered. If you won't, then let us know. We will seek out the others for help. There are many demon worlds, many invading all of my worlds. Gaia answered. I will help lighten the load on my way there. I answered. I made no clear commitments, but if there were demons on our way out of the Gaia territory, we'd just destroy them. Very well. Gaia reached into her armor and took out a golden ticket. A ticket for assistance. Should you need my best warriors, this will be it. This is a battle against demons with potentially godlike powers. The creatures capable of capturing gods. What will this ticket be? I clarified. Myself, if the situation calls for it. Good, I answered. Thank you. But before we could leave, Gaia had questions of her own. Why did you turn down the world faith system? I liked the level system. I answered. The world faith system benefits were not relevant to me. 336. Shrouded. 336. Year 310, continued. Gaia outer middle world IA golden portal, and they were sent to the edges of Gaia's territory once more. Think this thing is a trap? Lumoof asked as he held up the giant ticket. It didn't feel all that strong. Not like Hawa's bomb. It felt flimsy, its presence easily overwhelmed by Lumoof's spiritual domain. Hawa's bomb felt like a solid rock that pulsed with power, while this ticket felt like a wet rag along a flowing river. It didn't hold up very well. Gaian summoning ticket, an object with sufficient divine energy to call upon Gaia itself to descend momentarily and deliver divine fury. It could be. The best way we can deal with this issue is to obtain similar items from other gods, and use them to check on each other. Stella said, as far as we can tell, other gods can restrict the action of a god. Lumoof flipped the thing around and decided that it was better for it to be stored somewhere else. So, just like Hawa's bomb, we teleported it all the way to Comedworld, where it was kept far away from anything and everything. So we should visit Ava and whoever that is next. Lumoof clarified as they landed on the world. Yeah, but first, let's kill some demons. Edna smiled, as her eyes gazed at the void path through the stars. The middle worlds still faced demons, just with surprising rarity. Let's deal with this and get some steam off. I've been itching for a fight. And the domain holders fought a demon king. We killed it. The three were too much for regular demon kings. And the demon king felt weak. Edna alone could hold it down, and once the effects of Gaian divine law over their world were added to the mix, the demon kings were challenging, but ultimately a manageable threat. Gaia Middle World 2. The domain holders destroyed a demon king within days of their arrival. Lumoof didn't gain a level. Edna didn't either. Stella did. Level 199. Stella said, we were immensely close to the edge, and I wondered what sort of abilities Stella would gain at level 200. I can't actually believe I am so close. Well, then let's get going. You need to start doing more against the demon kings. Edna countered, but it was strange. A few more battles later didn't move the needle. We defeated 3 more demon kings on 3 more middle and peripheral worlds over the course of 3 to 4 months. Then we were back in the sun rings. I actually think that the level 200 needs something else. A kind of epiphany or some kind of profound realization. Stella countered, let's go visit the other gods. Really? Did we have that? Edna and Lumoof asked simultaneously. The two looked at each other temporarily to rest. The sun rings were each linked to each other and we could move between them with the Eurasian gates. However, because they were powered by void mana, heroes could not use them. You two are almost combat-focused domain holders. The rules that apply to you don't apply to mages. We've known since the very start that mages have their own set of rules and conditions that make it difficult for the rest of us. Stella vented. She wasn't mad, just annoyed at how the system made it difficult for magic users, and a challenge we faced even till today. Well, I suppose we can go look for these epiphanies, and these encounters with gods are more likely to generate the necessary epiphanies. Lumoof declared. After all, you just leveled after meeting Gaia. Maybe you'll gain more if we meet Nera or Ava. Stella pondered the idea and realized it made sense. But the three were a little tired, and so once they were back in the sun rings, it was much easier to hop back home. I hope we meet Ava first. At least I wouldn't be so stressed out about it. What if Ava wants his territory back? Well, then so be it. I answered. Year 311. First, Lumoof made a trip to Satria and called on Hawa. It was strangely appropriate for a priest to play the role of diplomatic messenger between the gods. Maybe, in an ancient time when the gods were close and pseudo-pantheons existed, the priests were messengers between bickering gods. We met Gaia, Lumoof said to Hawa, who seemed thoroughly amused. He sends his regards. I imagine it is unpleasant. Hawa responded. The old one was in a male form, or a female form? Female. Ah, then you've met the nicer one. Gaia, the old one, exists in 3 forms. At least, 10,000 years ago when we were also close enough to somewhat interact. The combined form was the most unpleasant of the 3, but the most powerful. That should have been something you said. Our divine memory operates like a patch of things scattered all over the place. I do not remember what I do not remember. But more importantly, Gaia offered us a ticket to fight against the demons. I ask that you do the same, as a commitment to our venture into the Demonlands. He did? He did, Hawa asked but then answered the question himself. Maybe, he just asked the system and the system responded. Interesting way of going about things. This is new to me as well, but I can do so too. Very well. Here, a similar golden ticket appeared in Hawa's hand, and Lumoof received it. We realized that the gods had a way of replicating what each other did. What does this actually do? This is a condensed spiritual faith. The prayers of our faithful, captured and bottled. Raw faith, before the system converts them into faith points. If released, for a brief moment, we can temporarily reveal ourselves in that location. Think of miracles, bigger but transient. I see. You can see through it, can't you? A little. We can always see things through our faith. If it feels like we are spying on you, then you may want to keep it somewhere far away. Like you did with my bomb. You can tell, we were letting them spy on us. But now that we knew, at least it would be intentional. It is a feature of the faith system. We know where our faith is. But as I said, what we see is fairly limited. The strength of faith is what determines visibility. Not altogether dissimilar to how I could see and sense those with Eonic classes, but they'd taken it to a galactic level. I'll be headed to search for Ava and Nera. Or any of the other gods. Ava is the monk, the esoteric, though I dare say Ava is also the most diversified of us gods. Ava in the old times was more of a secluded artist. The Ivan faith was generally more popular amongst the flying folk. The avian Garudas, the harpies, and the winged angels. Ivan priests were always a little more insular, and they generally preferred high, secluded places where they could be close to the world. You can say they are perhaps the most aligned to someone like yourself. Wait, Lumoof stopped, as we realized we could better understand the angels. We've generally ignored the angels after our past interactions. I met the angels. What are they? Before the gods settled on using heroes as a way of dealing with demons, some of them experimented on an elite army. Ivan, Nera, and a few other gods created many different types. The angels, the winged dragonlings, and a few other types of elite warriors, all without the natural inhibitions of the spirit that allowed them to reach into the great heights. These were the first, pre-heroic, armies, a modification of the powerful armies we always had on our core worlds. We waited for Hawa to continue. Alas, the cost of these armies were too heavy to maintain in faraway worlds, especially with our limited influence. It also consumes faith for us to create warriors without the natural level limits. It is not much individually, but for it to be a powerful army, it is quite an expense, especially when spread throughout hundreds of worlds. They also greatly disrupted the natural power balance of these worlds. Even moving armies of that size from world to world was a significant faith expense. In the end, a short-term, expendable army of exceptionally powerful heroes, who were designed to wither after victory, was far more effective, while we reserved these elite armies for our core worlds. That was the closest we got to a confession from Hawa on the nature of heroes. It was not a pleasant message to deliver to the heroes. Ken was right. What of Nera? Nera is one of the 3 gods of the elves. And Nera goes by many, many names. Well, I suppose we all have many names, and in some worlds I have multiple names as well. They call it aspects. How does the system know who is praying to who? Lumuf asked. I mean, if you go by many names, how does the faith reach you? Ah, easy. In each world we mark and reserve certain names. So, prayers on these worlds to those certain names are directed to us. Names have tremendous power, and the core defines the meaning of names. Wait, doesn't that mean that the demons can override the meaning of names when they control the core? They could, but only for that world. So far from what I have seen, they appear to approach it like feral beasts, consuming everything. I now understood why I could harvest the hero's spirit and heroic fragments only after I placed my core or my node down in a location. I was not a named entity in that world's library of names. Without being named, the world didn't know I had priority to the hero's spirit. In the end, I prodded Hawa for more details on the other gods. It's disturbing how the system really works like a system. Stella said, as we peel back the layers of the system, I wouldn't be surprised if there's really some magical supercomputer at the heart of it all, assigning names and rules. Maybe it's just a massive patrique. The core was the heart of every world. It was how the world's law is stored and how its specific rules are interpreted. Our domains made us into some kind of exception. An alien, but could you weaponize this? Surely, if each rule is controlled by the core, we can use this as a weapon. Twist the rules to our advantage. Like the Black Sun. What if the Black Sun has a planet nearby with a core that actually controls the rules of that realm? Like the sun rings, each of the sun rings exist with a planet nearby. The planet may be uninhabited or controlled by the demons, but I am quite sure that the planet's core actually has authority over the natural laws that apply over the entire realm, including the sun rings. Stella might be right. If the Black Sun was incredibly powerful, attacking it would be foolish. But destroying the entity that controlled the planet's core and using that core's will of the world to undo or change that realm's laws could allow us an entry point into the Black Sun. You might be onto something. I know, but let's go get my level 200 first. Sun Rings 3 Peripheral World I, 1 jump away from Sun Rings 3. Edna asked as we arrived. So, feel anything? I think so. Lumuf said, I sorta feel something. Like a vague gut feeling. Just go with it. I think we're far away. It's most likely far away. Such a powerful structure can only exist without other gods meddling. More appropriately, if the sun rings were near to any other god, that god would have the necessary power to easily destroy it. Stella said, so, by that logic implies that this area used to be in a vacuum, and that the gods do not overlap. So, if a space was most likely occupied by eras in the past, no one made a fuss when it switched allegiances and became part of the demon's territory. It's too far and too costly for them to make a fuss. Even if they wanted to, the expense was likely something too high, especially to destroy something like the sun rings. Stella clarified, but let's go. I think we need at least 5 hops before we find something. There was nothing that needed to be said about demons. They were in existence to be annihilated, and so we did. Stella, Edna, and Lumuf thus went on a Demon King hunting spree. It took us a century and then some since I re-emerged from the Rottedlands. But it was amusing that my 3 domain holders were at the level that hunting Demon Kings was entirely possible. 4 more Demon Kings died over a period of 2 months as the 3 demigods reached further and deeper into the lands. We were likely to be approaching Ivan territory, because when we reached the 5th world we encountered Ivan temples. Stella's level 200 remained elusive, but we were already close. We were not going to stop now. The 6th world we arrived at was something of a wonder. A world with 3 suns, surrounding a single planet. A world where 3 suns and 3 moons actually orbited a single supermassive planet. The main supermassive planet was filled with all kinds of humans, elves, dwarves, and many more unusual races. People with animal heads, like tiger heads, which referred to themselves as tigerans. There were mermaids on their seas. The moons, though, were actual regular-sized planets, and they too had their own people on it. Each of the 3 moon worlds had their own races. One with an insectoid folk, while another moon was a total water world filled with mermaids and mermen and fish. The third one was filled with some kind of rock crab golem humanoid. The reason that we were drawn to this world was the same as many others. Divinity. The supermassive world was named Ditan, and the surface of the supermassive world revealed an interesting subterranean layer with just as massive tunnels and caves. Caves that were so large that they may as well have been entire countries. But for us, the 3 demigods only had to follow the familiar scent of divinity, and soon we found ourselves diving deeper underground where we encountered a giant worm god that was still in the process of devouring a demon king. Truly, there were predators for even the most apex of predators, and this gigantic worm was clearly a domain holder of some kind. Yet it did not speak. It radiated a powerful aura that made us feel as if we were staring at something similar to us in strength. It was at least level 200, but not enough to be level 250. We could feel its aura against ours. It didn't respond. Well, I think we should leave. Stella suggested in the end. As long as it eats demons, I guess we can let it be. The locals referred to the worm god as the demon eater, and it appeared to be a creature that somehow thrived on consuming demons. It still boggles my mind how something like that could reach that level of power. Perhaps it had somehow consumed a weakened demon king? We were about to move to the next world, when we received an urgent call for help from our own people on the sun rings. Someone was using the Eurasian gates, and it was not one of us. The 3 domain holders had to quickly jump back and confront whatever it was. Back on Sun Rings 3, the Eurasian gates whirled to life, and then, a titan stepped through it. A giant man covered in a full-body suit of steel and helmet was just as surprised to see us. The man's steel fist glowed with power and slammed into Edna's shield. "Welcome. Who might you be?" Edna asked. The man stared at Edna, then at Stella. When his eyes looked at Stella, he looked horrified and tapped on something. The man was about to magically warp away, but Lumuf's roots wrapped around him and the magic vanished. "I think we can talk here." The man gulped and a second fist smashed into Edna's shield again. But the steel man looked at Lumuf and Edna and sighed. Who are you? Are you a member of the Void Cult?" "Void Cult?" Lumuf said. The roots continued to hold onto the man's body. "Why do you have someone with void energies with you?" He pointed. "One of the demons. She's a master of void magic, but she isn't a demon." Lumuf intervened. "Now, who are you?" The man was clearly at least a domain holder, but he was likely just barely a domain holder, someone in the level 150s. "Just kill me if that is what you want. I won't speak to someone of the Void Cult, and I won't spill my secrets." "I don't intend to," Lumuf said, as our vines wrapped around the man. "We are not from the Void Cult. What do we have to say to prove otherwise?" The steel helmet stared at Stella, and then started to say something in an alien language that sounded like a combination of barks and screams. Stella just stared at the man like an alien. "What in the world is that?" The man stopped. You didn't react to that? What was that supposed to be?" Stella clarified. "I'm human, and I learned void magic from the Zaratans. And I've been using it to open pathways through the Void Sea." "Zaratans? Oh, those Zaratans. You learned void magic from the Void Swimmers." The steel man looked immediately relieved. "You can let go. I promise I won't run away." Lumuf glanced at Edna, and Edna nodded. "Very well. So, who are you, and why?" "I am Arthim, but you can call me anything you want, and I guess you can call me a world hopper. I hop between worlds using this. It goes by many names, but you can call it the Ancient World Key." The steel man displayed a small object filled with divine mana. "It opens a small portal between worlds, big enough for me to hop. I use these ancient gates to save my world key's remaining use charges. They charge extremely slowly, only one charge every 50 years. "Well, where are you headed?" Lumuf asked. "One of the other safe worlds. Far from the demons and the petty gods. I have to move around because demons and heroes and all that." "So you just ran away?" Edna immediately looked at the man. She clearly was feeling a little judgment, but tried her best not to show it. Yes, and no shame in that. I may be high level and already took the first steps into the divine, but I know my strength. I can't match the demon kings. And you did nothing to help? Says who? The man looked indignant. The world needs heroes. I tried that hero stuff thousands of years ago and all I got were scars. Hell, I even had a beautiful body once, and now I cover myself up in this armor just to keep my body from burning up. Lumoof and Edna looked at each other. There are gods and others who can help. Why didn't you approach them? Others? You trust the gods too easily. A weak demigod like me would be turned into food and an enemy to be slain for experience and levels. I fought with Gaia's hero once, and in the end, I got doused in a heavy demonic fire that I cannot extinguish, only suppress. Gaia's so-called priests refused to help, and their god wanted my service for any assistance. You're immortal, are you not? Edna asked. The steel man Arthem's glowing eyes blinked. What exactly do you mean? I mean, you don't age. Thus, the years are just time you have. Unlimited time. Some periods of service don't sound too unreasonable. But I refuse to bend the knee to an insane god like Gaia. Or any of these other crazy folk. All of these faith gods are insane. You've just not seen the crazy stuff. Stella cut in, frustrated. She clearly didn't think the person was sane. All right, you clearly are afraid of the Void Cult. Who are they? Why should I tell you? The man said defiantly, and then Lumoof's roots began to curl around his armor a little tighter. He quickly changed his mind. Shapeshifters. They use void magic to infiltrate worlds and corrupt them. They turn the faithful against each other and create chaos. Once the world is sufficiently weakened, they plant the demon crystals to lure the demons to those worlds. The three were silent. We waited for him to continue. The steel man paused and stared at the three, taking turns to stop briefly at each one. Wait, you've not seen them? I can't say we did. When's the last time you saw one yourself? Lumoof asked. Is it like a few thousand years ago? Around that, I can't quite recall. I enter periods of hibernation to deal with my health issues. So you're dealing with heavily outdated information. This cult may be long gone and that's why we don't know about it. Lumoof theorized, but a few thousand years was also a relatively short time to the gods. So it is possible that we really didn't encounter them just yet. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. Lumoof shrugged. Well, that is so. If we ever encounter these things. It's been many years, didn't you gain enough levels to overcome whatever curse you were dealing with? Edna asked, also curious. Based on how our own domain holders grew over time, it really was a matter of time until they gained the strength and experience needed to become stronger, and thus reverse or mitigate the effects of any curse. I had the impression curses don't stick on domain holders all that well. Arthem couldn't believe what he heard. You are sort of right and sort of wrong. Also, do you think levels grow on trees, and I can just somehow outgrow my curses? The three of them looked at each other. Lumoof almost wanted to correct him, but then realized it was pointless, and so decided to talk about something else. Anyway, Arthem, where is this safe world of yours? And why would I disclose such an important thing? And I won't tell you even if you threaten me. Lumoof decided to change direction, and so loosened his hold over the armored man. All right, I won't insist. But the fact that you've used the Eurasian gates at this time is some luck. Do you want to travel somewhere with us, where we can help you? I think we can help you with the curse, at least. Arthem looked at Lumoof like he was mad. You want me to go with you somewhere? Yes, meet Eon, and if we happen to like each other, we can help you with your curse. No, I will not do so. Instead, I will be on my way. Final question before I let you go. Lumoof asked, what's your domain? The man paused, and then sighed. I see no reason to disclose. Goodbye. The man tapped his artifact again, and we watched him vanish through the object's divine ability. At that moment, we took a feel of the object's divine aura and realized it was not one of the divine auras we felt before. Do you think he's good? Lumoof looked around. He feels like a coward. At least, I feel he's likely harmless. Edna said, his punches didn't hurt that much. A strange person to be a domain holder. We've met many domain holders, and yet I feel like he's probably a researcher, a mage or some sort. Stella was too busy studying the vanished domain holder. The divine energies vanished in a direction different from us. His divine key uses a different sort of map, almost as if he is traveling in a different void layer, and so, his world is likely not nearby in our map. We should get one of those. Maybe Ava has one. Let's go back and meet Ava. 337. Bulb. 337. Year 311. The trio thus saw it fit to slay any demon kings along the path. World after world, attacked by demons. Along the way they saw more of Ava's believers. It took a full year to hop 10 worlds, and just like Gaia, as we approached deeper and deeper, we noticed that the cost of opening a void path through the void sea increased. A wave in the void. Stella described it like trying to swim upriver. Ava, I often wondered whether that god would be surprised to see us again. Actually, now that I had access to both Gaia and Hawa, financially, I most likely could make a huge amount of money selling pilgrimage services to their home worlds. For believers of Gaia and Hawa, they would likely want to feel the presence of their gods. Could I be the god of travel, that way? With my clones and nodes, I was already one step along that path. Maybe myself and Stella could be the two gods of the journey. Or the gods of pilgrimage. Maybe Stella's level 200 would be about traveling, since it was her access to void magic that truly unlocked the wider world for us. Without her void magic, a lot of what we achieved today was impossible, or I would have to survive and fight for much longer until I gained access to some sort of divine magic and could use divine portals like Gaia. It could be a great way for me to bridge and smoothen out old conflicts with the 4 temples and restore normal relations between the religions. Gigantodragon, the dragon-shaped peripheral world. Let me try this one alone. Lausanne said to the rest of her domain holder peers. She wanted to gain levels quickly, and one way she was sure to do so was to try Demon Kings on her own. The challenge of the battle would help her. I'll call for help once I'm spent. A cycle of peace was finally over, and Gigantodragon would face another Demon King. But the past decade of peace brought respite to many of the once destroyed parts of their world, though the tail half of Gigantodragon was only 20 to 30% of what it once was. There were still many dead towns and villages that used to be home to the Dragonlings. Many of them were still dead today. Sure. Aben motioned with his hand, as if he was an usher showing Lausanne to her place. All yours, princess. Lausanne frowned. I'm a little too old to be a princess. It also reminded her of her younger days when she was the, de facto, princess of Eon. Maybe, to her, it brought back some unpleasant memories. Elves don't age, so I think you count. Aben insisted, as the elven woman walked a step closer to the knight. But knock yourselves out. Lausanne punched Aben playfully anyway, but her senses were honed on the coming demon. Through our shared connection, we could subtly feel the Demon King traveling through the path. For a knight, you sure like to insult your princess. The void path buzzed. The Order's agents returned from the demon world. The Demon King is on its way, milady. We already knew, but it was nice to have confirmation. Got it. Lausanne nodded, as the void mages passed a few reports to her. She flipped through them quickly and returned it. Inform the rest. Let's get ready. You get ready. Aben smiled, more than happy to let the elven lady deal with the Demon King. The rest of us have time. Would you like some tea? Aben said as he found a place to sit. Lausanne blinked a few times and wanted to punch the knight again. He dodged. Aben was better when he was relaxed. He clearly didn't seem to mind not having chosen any of the domain choices. I supported him too. In an earlier conversation, I told him, Aben, if you don't want to choose, go ahead. It's worth experimenting on this and figure out what happens when we don't choose any of the 3 choices. From what we know of the system, there exist some interesting quirks and options that may appear when we go off the beaten path. Aben took it as approval to hold off his choice for longer. As per our initial findings, we've confirmed that it's a giant lion-headed demon. Strong fire element bias. It seems to be a strong anti-magic type of demon too. The void mage commented, we'll head back first. Lausanne watched the mages vanish as she stood alone. Everyone else respected her request, and so stationed themselves far away. She breathed and her spear pulsed with her. Another 50 levels to go, she said to herself and Lightwood. She wanted to reach level 200. If she could get to level 250, even better. The Demon King arrived. Lightwood glowed with all the star mana she could feed it. The spear transformed with the star mana and turned into a spear of light. The skies flashed like it was a thunderstorm, whenever the slightly green-tinted spear exploded with each star mana-infused strike. The spectators watched, while Aben got his tea. He wasn't a big fan of tea, but it felt appropriate to have one while watching Lausanne fight a demon king. You seem confident in her victory. Rune and Johann sat next to him and teased. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? Aben poured a cup for each of them too. Hoya glared at the knight, but decided not to say anything. Did you bless her? Rune asked. A simple set of buffs. Hoya answered. For a challenge, she shouldn't get them. The heroes don't get buffs. She just wants to know where she stands when compared to the heroes. A buff doesn't change all that much. A buff from you changes a lot, Matriarch Hoya. Aben countered. There were more flashes of light. The battle went on. Some of the Order's operatives distributed lunch. But halfway through lunch, Lausanne's lightwood was thrust into the Demon King's exposed core, and the core shattered. She was victorious. This time, after fighting for only half a day, she killed the Demon King single-handedly. That Demon King was rather weak, she declared, as she and Lightwood both gained 5 levels from the exchange. Reckless, Hoya scolded and healed her. She was covered in dirt, and she had taken some damage. But a domain-level body empowered by star mana was incredibly tanky. Hoya tried to pinch her, and Lausanne squirmed. But it's not the first time we told you that, so you're not going to stop. You've reached what most heroes should reach. The point where heroes can kill demon kings single-handedly. From our history we knew of many heroes that could take on demon kings on their own. Even Kay managed to do it with a bit of support from the rest of us. The white statue could fight a demon king. Osroids could do it. Eon could do it. I have star mana, and now I also have lightwood. An actual divine living weapon. So, I thought I should be able to do it, even if I'm still at a lower level. I suppose the presentation and style of the battle is not as clean as it should be. Lausanne said. The mages told me they rate the Demon King a 4 out of 10, so don't get too confident. I wouldn't want to see you in that biolab. Hoya tapped the elf on the head, maybe a little harder than normal. Alright, you're good. When's the next one? Alright, we're clear for a few years. Unless we head over to the Gaia or Ava side of things. If we establish a clone or node on that side, we could get access to more. If it's not because of all the void mana around the sun rings, I'd love to try and take on the defender demon kings on the sun rings. Lausanne sighed. I'd love to see where I match up. The overwhelming void mana was a significant disadvantage for Lausanne, since they combusted around her. There was so much void mana that the mages predicted that there would be a perpetual explosion around her. In a way, the Sun Rings was a great anti-hero counter. No, it could even be said that the Sun Rings were engineered to be inaccessible to heroes. At least in Lausanne's case, she could convert her star mana into regular mana and still make the trip. The 2 native heroes of Gigantodragon were busy doing normal transmigrated hero things like tending to their harem. For them, the warning signs in their mind didn't trigger until the Demon King actually arrived. It made me suspect that was why each Demon King was accompanied by a system announcement. It functioned as a call to arms to all heroes located in a particular world. The Order maintained a large building on the largest city of Gigantodragon. The locals referred to it as Fort Brambles, because of the thick brambles that surrounded the fortified structure. The domain holders would visit the local institutions, as a means to check on their operations and also have a look at the developments since they last visited. The domain holders were often away for months, years on expeditions through the worlds. And so, the local operatives on Gigantodragon and the various other worlds would only see the domain holders once every few years. Dragonling operatives within the Order was still a rarity, but since our presence here was slightly over a decade ago, the first batches of graduates were now ready for the mid-levels. That meant warriors and soldiers around level 70 to 80. Dragonlings were natural flyers, and thus they were the first Valthorn soldiers capable of flight without the use of magic or tools. Though from our tests so far, this flying ability didn't work that well on some of the demonic worlds. They helped to add strength to our air force and augment the use of drakes and wyverns from Capra. Within the Order, we generally classified the type of combat engagements into 3 main types. DK class engagements referred to all combat engagements with exceptional opponents, and this was an area where the bulk of the order played a supporting role. DK class engagements were mainly confined to the domain holders and heroes, with some limited roles for the level 100 to 149. These engagements were the most publicized due to the sheer level of power, and the Order's propaganda corps would weave beautiful stories targeted at the general public. Most of the Order's soldiers would not be able to participate in them directly. Then, there were the two major combat engagements where most of the Order was deployed to and was often unseen to the public. Offensive operations. This was where we engaged in battle against demonic swarms. Invasions into demonic worlds, countering opponents like demonic champions, battling other nations, and so on. Defensive operations referred to peacekeeping engagements, mainly to enforcing order and maintaining our presence in the various nations. It was a necessary reminder to all the various kingdoms and nations that our strength was real. Mortal memory was short, and leaders especially so. For most new recruits, they are sold the dream of one day playing a part in the great battles of yore, though they would have to spend decades and centuries in the trenches serving in numerous offensive and defensive operations. Have you considered changing your ways yet? I taunted the Crystal King. The city of Malga changed a lot ever since I took over a few decades ago. The humans that once treated the Crystal King as a god in the flesh were now educated in the nature of levels and thus no longer approached the creature as a mythical thing. No, the Crystal King answered. I would rather be destroyed than to live under your rule. Must you be so stubborn, old rock? The avatar that hosted Jonpu countered. Jonpu's avatar seemed to have a decent fondness for the rock prisoner and frequently came to chat with the old rock. I suppose it is only normal for insects to live in service of this creature. The rock countered. Jonpu fumed, but the insult was not the first. As the order brought about a great peace to three worlds and the demon kings became nothing more than a notification, the relations between the three great nations thawed. Perhaps, by force, the Order enforced trade in mingling areas and recruited heavily from all three factions. Those that returned to the three nations then brought their norms and experiences with other races, and that gradually changed the culture and attitudes towards those different from them. It was by no means peaceful. There were still deep-seated suspicions, ancient hatred, and prejudice. They did not treat each other the same. But at least the first instinct was no longer war. It would likely take centuries of coexistence to reach a stage where many of these inherited prejudices disappeared. I suppose it is a very rock-like thing to do, to stay in place for a long time. I actually don't even think this is much of a punishment, Jonpu said to my spirit tree located right around the Crystal King. It is all right. I do not expect many to be my allies, and instead, many more like him will serve as my whetstone. The human nations he once protected now feed and strengthen my armies. And with each and every battle I grow stronger. Like a rock, even if he emerged, he would find that he has already been left behind. I declared. Three Worlds was now the third largest contributor to the war effort after Treehome and Mountain World, and Malga was at the heart of that war industrial revolution. I'd love to offer you a chance to fight at our side, and in fact, I would even offer you another world for it, one where I would leave you be. Jonpu countered, somehow deciding to argue against me. Please do not accept. I still have not received my promised Sandworld. It's in progress. I countered, but it should be easier to find a generic human-heavy world. It seems to be what you like. But the Crystal King shrunk and just refused to talk to us. The two golem warriors of Eras reignited a long question in my mind. What happened when the Soul Forge possessed all its colors? Was something like the Eurasian sentinels the limit of the artificial souls we could create? I sent Hoya, my other representative, to speak to them once more. Lumuf, Edna, and Stella were far away, still traveling towards the Ivan worlds. Jorkin, Hoya said, and the sentinel glanced at her strangely. Hoya could feel the sentinel's attempt to examine its structure. What do you remember of the Eurasian worlds? Plenty, Jorkin said. I was created in the Crucible of Eras, a beautiful rainbow-colored forge, where my creator worked both the spirit and metal to create warriors like me. It is a shame that many of my brethren were destroyed. Together, we can even fight stronger foes. Do you think that your brethren survived inside the sun rings? They must. I am a creation of my God, and I feel my God's life. It is still there, and so, I must believe that my God's people continue to live within the round worlds. Hoya pondered. Does Ares's people possess the means to travel between worlds? With the Eurasian gates, yes. But beyond that, I doubt it. There may be no more than 10 individuals on the core worlds with the ability to venture into the void independently. There's still 10? Yes. My patron gifted some of his faithful with special artifacts that allowed them to move from world to world. A special key. The ancient world key? That is one of the names it went by, but each god made their own version with its own quirks and rules. There was a traveler who seemed to possess it, but he had long vanished. Yet, he doesn't seem to call Ares his god. Then he must be a thief, or he received it from some other god. Ares made about 100 such world keys, and the other gods should be able to replicate them should they manage to get hold of it. Many such world keys were destroyed over the years due to wars and combat or lost within the void. Faith powers the gods. If, like you say, that Ares still lives, then there must be many more worlds where Ares's believers remain. Hoya stated, and the golem nodded. So, if there are core worlds that the demons intentionally left alive, I cannot help but suspect that Ares may be behind the demons. Jorkin looked at the woman, and somehow the golem's gem-like appearance managed to frown. I do not believe my creator would create something designed for destruction of such scale. But the possibility is not ruled out. In your last days, do you remember Ares behaving unusually? Hoya pushed. The idea of a god going mad was very much a possibility. It was a tale as old as time. No, Ares was absorbed in the creation of the Void Sun and this network. Unless, you believe that the Void somehow corrupted Ares. Jorkin countered, but the prospect of Void corrupting a god seemed to shake the golem's voice slightly. After a moment, he answered firmly. No, I reject that notion. My spirit continues to maintain a clear link to my creator. If the Void poisoned my god in some way, I must suffer its consequences too. Yet, I do not, so I believe my creator has not been corrupted. How are you sure? The golem had no answer. The golem might be extremely well educated with some inbuilt Eurasian knowledge. But it wasn't sure about things such as souls and void mana. Hoya then attacked. As a faithful of Eon, you can see why I am suspicious. Even if I want to help you, I cannot rule out that you are, in some way or form, compromised. Possibly, and very likely, without your knowledge. You maintain a link with your god, and yet, you do not know what actually goes into that link. The golem sat. I concur with your assessment. My comprehension of the ways of void corruption is limited. If the void magic somehow drove my god mad, it is possible that I lack the ability to see its effects. Good. Then, let's assume that Ares has somehow gone mad, or perhaps, is somehow corrupted by void magic. If we allow you to approach your god, that corruption could spread to you. No, what we truly fear is that you turn